I think Alabama wins big in a bounce back this week. But do they need it?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Full SEC picks for Week 7. Can anyone push Boise State for a Group of 5 playoff spot? All coming up on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Luke Robinson, Locked On Crimson Tide, joining me here on the show. Luke, you, like many people, were shocked with the loss at Vanderbilt last week. Bama comes back home as a 21.5-point favorite. I think they are going to come out with an edge, a chip on their shoulder in front of the home crowd. I think they clobber South Carolina here, even worse than Ole Miss did last week, which was 27-3. Do they need to have that sort of game to prove themselves and to the rest of the country that they're really an SEC and national title contender?
I think they do. I think it would be, everybody needs to get back on board. And look, here's the thing. If Alabama had lost to Georgia, let's say Georgia had come back and Ryan Williams didn't teleport into the end zone right there at the end, and let's say Georgia had won that game and then Alabama clobbers Vandy, I think everybody would feel better than they feel right now, having beaten Georgia and then lost to Vanderbilt. I really believe that. But in the end, it's still 1-1 in the league. And I think that's what is important. You have to remember now with this new 12-team playoff, losing to Vanderbilt, while awful, is not the same thing as it was these last several years. It's a little bit of the sting is off of it. That's both the good and the bad, depending on how you want to look at it. But, I think they need it to regain everybody's trust and just make everybody feel good again. I mean, everybody was so high after the Georgia game. And so it's really, in hindsight, it's like, okay, we can see why they didn't play well against Vanderbilt, right? But I don't think anybody thought they were going to lose to Vanderbilt. That said, this South Carolina team, they don't have Diego Pavia at quarterback. They've got a fantastic pass rush. Love Dylan Stewart. Love a lot of aspects of the South Carolina team. But they're not super dynamic at quarterback. Rocket Sanders is pretty good. It doesn't feel like he's having as good a year as he did at Arkansas. I feel like in the end, Alabama's going to end up winning this pretty big. And the reason I feel that is oddly because the point spread is 21.5. I was thinking it was going to be 12, 13 points. It comes out at 21.5, and I'm like, somebody knows something I don't.
Yeah, that line, according to our friends at FanDuel, I'd take Alabama either way. I think they're winning this game in the 38-10 range. I don't think that this is close, but I love the point that you brought up about how if you flip the results of the last couple of weeks, we'd all think Alabama is fine. So then the question really comes down to, with the Crimson Tide, Luke, would you rather have a team that has a higher ceiling and a lower floor, or a higher floor and a lower ceiling? Because if you lost to Georgia, you'd say, well, maybe they're not one of the best in college football, but they're still a really, really good team. Look, they still found a way to beat Vanderbilt. They didn't play incredibly well, but it was on the road, and it was weird. But instead, you have this capability of outscoring Georgia 28-0 in a football game, getting outscored by Georgia to be trailing in that football game, and you can lose to Vanderbilt on the road, who's a decently respectable team, but they are certainly not great. They're not going to be an SEC title contender by any stretch of the imagination. How does Kalen DeBoer get this team to play like the better version of themselves?
I think that the good news is maybe this was a wake-up call. You hate to have a wake-up call like this. It's much more fun to have a wake-up call where you beat Vandy 40-35 yourself than lose 40-35. But maybe this is a wake-up call for him. And look, Malachi Moore, who's a two-time team captain, obviously had some controversy this week, but I give him a lot of kudos. Jimmy and I on the podcast said that he probably deserved to be suspended for some of his antics. But as the week wore on, and then he apologized publicly, he apologized to the team. He also apologized to Diego Pavia. I think all that led me to believe, maybe I jumped to conclusions too. And I think, again, it wasn't the most egregious of errors. I certainly hope he never does it again. And if he does do it again, that's going to be a real big problem. But I tend to believe in Malachi Moore right now. And I feel like I feel like he's going to have a big game. I feel like Jalen Milroe is going to have a big game. I feel like Ryan Williams is going to score another touchdown. He scored in every game so far this year. And I also believe Alabama's running backs may get on track a little bit. They didn't have the opportunity last week because they only had the ball for 18 total minutes. And it felt like they were always playing from behind because they start off the game down 13-0 before you can blink.
I don't have any qualms about the Alabama offense because they've been productive every week, not perfect all the time. Literally no team ever in the history of college football plays great every single quarter. But Alabama's offense has been explosive. They have scored points. Yeah, Jalen Milroe had the interception against Vanderbilt, but I don't have any issues on that side of the ball. The problems for Alabama against Vanderbilt came on the defensive side of the ball. And I think a lot has been made about the Malachi Moore situation and whether or not Kalen DeBoer has, made the right hires on the defensive side. Because, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for Alabama to give up 40 points to Vanderbilt. I don't care what environment you are playing in. Can Kane Womack and company get this right?
Well, I certainly hope so. Yeah, right now there are a lot of Kane Womack doubters. I don't blame them. And here's another thing that nobody's really talked about. That crowd, forget about playing on the road. Yeah, it's a different place than you normally play, but there was 80% Alabama fans. You looked in the stands, it was all red. Yep. And that's the way it is at Vanderbilt. I can't believe they had enough people to carry the goalpost away. But Kane Womack, he has a lot of doubters right now. I'm still on the fence. I'm still in the wait and see mode. I'm not going to throw him under the bus just yet because, hey, look, let's give him time to get some of his concepts in and get a little more acclimated with the SEC and this team in general, and let's see what happens. It's the same defense that held Georgia to 7 points at a half, last week. Now, they ended up giving up a lot in the second half, obviously. But, he also shut out Western Kentucky earlier this year. That's no small feat. But his teams have shown a tendency to give up long, time-consuming drives. It happened against South Florida, Wisconsin, happened against Vanderbilt, obviously.
Against Vandy, they couldn't get off the field on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. There were pivotal moments in that game, Luke, where you thought, this is where Alabama, flips a switch. They're down 1 score. Here's a 3rd and 8. They get off the field. They go score a touchdown. They start to get things rolling. And then Vanderbilt just kept converting. That's what surprised me the most about last Saturday.
Yep, I totally agree. And, a lot of mental errors. Alabama had a lot of penalties, had 2 turnovers, but didn't generate any turnovers themselves. Had one penalty where they had 2 number 2s on the field, which is kind of ironic because the week before, the 2 number 2s saved the game for Alabama. Ryan Williams with the game-winning touchdown and Xavier Brown with the game-winning interception. So, it's just weird that Alabama had so many mental errors a week after doing so well for a lot of that game against what a lot of people thought was the best team in the country. So I think this is a get-right game, and you need to get right because you got Tennessee coming up the next week. And look, I know Tennessee looks very, very human right now after that game against Arkansas, but if Vanderbilt's able to pick you apart, what do you think about Tennessee picking you apart? And that's what's scary to me.
What's your score prediction here, Luke? I'll stick with that 38-10 number that I floated earlier. I think Alabama makes a statement on both sides, reminds everybody, hey, we're still Alabama. We're still capable of winning the SEC and the national championship.
Yeah, I'll go 45-14. I think Alabama crosses the 40-point barrier again against Vanderbilt. Weirdly, that's the only game they haven't scored more than 40 on. That's weird. But I think they get over the 40-point barrier again this week.
Luke Robinson, Locked On Crimson Tide. Luke, appreciate it as always.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
What about the rest of the SEC? I'm picking that next. First, this episode brought to you by Z-Biotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember, to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Step 1. Drink Z-Biotics. That's what you do. Make it your first drink of the night. Then drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Don't have to worry about it. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order. When you use Locked On College at checkout, ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege at checkout for 15% off. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That is America's #1 sportsbook. Do you think Luke and I are right? And Alabama steamrolls, blows the doors off of South Carolina in Tuscaloosa this week? They're minus 21.5. You can go bet them at FanDuel.com. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Everything you want for college football is over there. Money line, point spread, whatever. Win totals are still up for certain teams. Conference title odds, Heisman odds, Ashton Genty's favorite. Talking about him more later on today's show. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Check them out. America's #1 sportsbook is at FanDuel.com. So another ranked, unranked matchup that some people might have circled as an upset pick is Tennessee hosting Florida. The only reason, and I mean the only reason, you would look at this matchup on paper and say, hey, Tennessee better watch out. Florida could do this. I guess there are 2 reasons. Number 1, Florida's been playing better football. They beat UCF handily last week. They've been playing better. Doesn't mean they're a good team yet. Just means they've been playing better. But number 2, and this is the bigger one that Vols fans, I'm sure, are well aware of, Florida's just kind of found ways to beat Tennessee when they shouldn't. Last year, Tennessee fans probably would have told you, no way we're losing to Florida. Or maybe they would have said, we're going to Florida. This is going to be tricky. Might depend on who you ask. But Florida's had a history of just finding ways to beat Tennessee. I don't think they do that here. So Tennessee, similar to Alabama, went on the road as a more than 2 touchdown favorite, and they lost the game outright. And it was a pretty sizable upset. And I thought Tennessee would struggle last week. I didn't think they'd lose. Thought they'd found a way to win, especially once they went up 14-3 and Arkansas was able to come back. But you come back home, you're playing a team that is not as good as the one you faced the prior week. Yeah, I think now South Carolina and Vanderbilt, I think, are closer than Arkansas and Florida, but at the very least, it's comparable. I feel the same way about the Vols here as I do about the Crimson Tide. I think this is come back home and make a statement game. This is come back home, remind yourself, remind your fans, remind the country, for that matter, that you're capable of pushing for a national and SEC championship. Maybe not necessarily in that order, perhaps in the opposite order, perhaps. Tennessee is favored, according to our friends over at FanDuel, by 15 points. Now, that number makes me go, over 2 touchdowns, rivalry game. Is it really going to get to that point? Is it going to get out of hand the way that I think Texas and Oklahoma could? Yeah, I do. It's 15.5 right now. Give me the Vols to win and eke out a cover. I mean, they'll squeak it out. Tennessee, 28-10. Vols defense shuts down the Florida offense, which I have not been impressed with this year. I won't be surprised if Florida ends this game with a single-digit number of points. 28-10, give me Tennessee to win and to cover. How about the game of the week in the SEC? Texas, Oklahoma, or is it Ole Miss, LSU? I don't know. Where did your mind go? My mind goes to Red River, of course, because it's a big rivalry. And I love Texas in this spot. I think they're just a better team across the board. Both teams are coming off a bye. There's no home field advantage here, of course. This is one of the most fun games of college football to watch every single year. Every single year, we all love watching it, no matter what team you are a fan of. You could be a fan of the UMass Minutemen, who host Missouri this week. Can UMass cover 27.5 at home? You know what? I'll say that they can. Missouri wins 35-17, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. But Texas, Oklahoma, I love Texas in this spot. I really do. I like the Longhorns coming into the year. I have liked them more since I've seen them play on the field. They have, aside from Mississippi State, taken care of teams that they are better than. And don't let the rankings fool you. Oklahoma's a top 20 team. They shouldn't be. They are not the 18th best team in college football. This is the second start for Michael Hawkins, his first in Red River. That's a lot for a young guy to handle. Against the Texas defense, that I think is one of the most underrated units in all of college football. So I like Texas to win the game 31-10. I like the Oklahoma defense and the way they played against Tennessee a few weeks ago, albeit in a loss. That game was at home. This is a neutral site. It's truly a 50-50 crowd, which is why it's such a unique environment and a fantastic spectacle for this beautiful sport. I think Texas wins. I think Quinn Ewers coming back jumpstarts the offense. Maybe he's a little rusty in the first quarter, but it's not exactly his first time playing college football or doing so in the burnt orange with Steve Sarkisian as his play caller. I take continuity over change every single time. Hawkins, second start. Quinn Ewers, not his second start. His third Red River. I think Texas wins that game big. And I don't know that Oklahoma keeps it close because I don't think that. I think if Texas comes out and plays well, there's nothing Oklahoma can do. Oklahoma, it's not going to completely shock me if they keep it close because, well, it's a rivalry game. Crazy things happen. But that's all you're really going for. I think that Sooner magic kind of got used last year when Texas had every opportunity to win and found a way to lose the game, and Oklahoma won it. To their credit, to be sure, I don't think Texas lets it get that close. 31-10. Ole Miss to LSU. Talked about this game a lot this week because it's such a fascinating matchup. You have a couple of coaches that, as Matt Moscona of Locked on LSU talked about on yesterday's show, really have incredibly safe seats because if Lane Kiffin were to go 9-3, miss the playoff this year, would Ole Miss fans really revolt and say, well, he's no good, he's not? I don't think so. If Brian Kelly loses this year, or if he misses the playoff this year and loses this football game on Saturday, are you going to revolt and say, I need to fire him? Like, it's year 3, it's a long contract, it's a big buyout? Like, probably not. I think Ole Miss is a better team on paper. I think they found themselves last week against South Carolina, which doesn't sound like a lot, but ask LSU whether it's easy to go to Columbia and just roll the Gamecocks the way LSU did, or the way Ole Miss did, sorry. I think this is a really fun football game. I do not believe it looks like it did a season ago where it's back and forth and offense and there's just no defense being played anywhere. Death Valley will be awesome. Love me some Tiger Stadium, but give me Ole Miss to go in. They're favored by 3.5. I think the Rebels go in, make a statement, and prove they are worth preseason hype here with this win. I think LSU's a good team. I don't think they're a great team just yet. I think they have a great quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. I think Ole Miss is capable of being a great team, and I think they prove that again this week. Ole Miss wins 27-20. Vanderbilt travels to Kentucky. I think Vegas is overreacting. I think Vegas is overreacting to Vanderbilt. They're underreacting to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt went to Columbia, Missouri, took Missouri to overtime, beat Alabama straight up, and Kentucky's favored by around 2 touchdowns? No. Does Kentucky win the game at home? I think so. Mark Stoops got a pretty good team. They've played some good football this season. I don't think they cover that number, though. Kentucky wins 24-13. I like that Kentucky defense a lot, and the way they've played this season, I don't think they're going to just completely blow out Vanderbilt here. I do think Kentucky wins, though, because they are at home. And lastly, in the SEC, since I've already picked Alabama to rout South Carolina, and I think Missouri will win, but I'll take UMass to cover, because why not? Why not take UMass to cover? Could be a bounce-back spot for Missouri. Ranked 21st in the country right now. I don't think they're the 21st best team in college football. Georgia hosting Mississippi State. Now, Mississippi State, once upon a time this season, Arch Manning was quarterback, pushed Texas. What do you think the line is on this game? What do you think the line is on Georgia hosting Mississippi State? 33.5. Oofda. That's a big number. That's a big number. A lot of people gave up on Georgia. Not me, my preseason national champion. I haven't wavered off of that. I didn't after they lost to Alabama. I thought they'd lose that game before the season. I thought they'd lose that game week of. They did. This is kind of playing out mostly how I expected Georgia to play this season. I think as the year goes on, you see great coaches start to have their team play better and better football. They picked up a solid win against an Auburn team that's not as bad as their record would indicate last week. 31-13 was the final score. I don't know if Mississippi State's getting to 13 points. I really don't. This is a rebuild year for the Bulldogs and Jeff Lebby, who could do an all right job. I don't know where they win a game the rest of the season. Their schedule is not exactly a walk in the park. They do have UMass later, so they'll win that. But, I mean, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, Missouri, Ole Miss. I think you got a 2-10 season incoming here for Mississippi State. So, I think they lose this game. Give me Georgia to win and cover. 42-3. I think the Bulldogs defense shows up in a big, big way. That's every game in the SEC this week. Let's go to another collection of teams that automatically get a team into the playoff. Boise State. Oh, wait, sorry, I meant to say the group of 5. Is there anybody else, though? Is there anybody else that can really do it? That needs to be discussed, and that is coming up next. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. That's Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. I have a question for everybody. Is anyone going to push Boise State for the G5 playoff spot? Think about this. If Boise State, which is currently ranked 17th in the country in the AP poll, and whenever their first college football playoff rankings come out, if they haven't lost by then, they'll be ranked in a similar vein. If they continue to play at the level that they have been, if Ashton Genty continues to be a bona fide Heisman Trophy finalist, if not favorite, and he's the betting favorite right now, I think Travis Hunter should be in that conversation. I think Cam Ward should be there. Those would be my 3 finalists if you gave me a vote to pick the 3 guys to go to New York City today. If Boise State just continues at this pace, is there anyone that you feel like can push them to be the highest ranked non-Power 4 conference champion? Because I sure don't. Now, the question in their own league is UNLV. UNLV had a tight loss last time out against Syracuse. They had a game-winning interception twice, and they dropped it both times. Pretty tough. Pretty tough for the Rebels there. But the more I look at Boise State's schedule, the more I go, man, I just don't see it. They're at Hawaii this week. Don't think Hawaii's got enough to push them. Then next week is the big game, or rather the following week on a Friday is the big game against UNLV. That game is in Las Vegas. It's going to be a fantastic, big-time football game. And UNLV can put themselves in that conversation to be sure. But, I mean, I just wonder if outside of Boise State in the Mountain West, the question I'm posing here is, can anybody put together a resume that's better? Army and Navy are the only unbeaten teams in the American right now. Because I think a lot of people that follow G5 football, and as I always say, far be it from me to ever overlook the fact that a Group of 5 team is getting into the college football playoff this year. Can you have a team from the American that could rise? Tulane can't lose another game. And you need Boise State to lose a game, and I don't even know if that would be enough. Because let's say Boise State loses to UNLV in the regular season. They're on the road, and they lose that game, but they win everything else, and they win the Mountain West, and they're 11-2 at the end of the year. If they're playing UNLV in the Mountain West title game, they will have avenged their only loss, and their other loss will be at Oregon by 3 points, and the Ducks are likely to finish the regular season in the top 10. We'll see what happens this week when they play Ohio State in Eugene. At the very least, at the bare minimum, Oregon's going to be a top 13 team by the end of the regular season, unless they lose a handful of games, which I don't think they will. So if Boise State goes 11-2, and even if Tulane wins out, is that a resume that's better than what Boise State's got? I don't think it is, because Oklahoma by the end of the year is not going to look like a great outcome for Tulane. It's not. Another team that could have put themselves into the fold, because Oklahoma's going to have 4 or 5 losses minimum by the end of the season. I think 4 is the minimum, 6 is the max. I think they probably end up at 5 losses by the end of the year. That game's not going to look as good. Kansas State, sure, that's a really good game. It's one that Tulane should have won because they were at home. Adarian Mensah unfortunately caught the turnover bug. But I don't know if that resume can beat Boise State at 11-2. Certainly not at 12-1. I'll get to the 12-1 scenario in just a moment. But let's say they go 11-2, whether that's a loss to UNLV or somewhere else, and they win the Mountain West. I don't know who's pushing them here. Liberty's unbeaten in Conference USA. They needed overtime to beat FIU earlier this week. James Madison could have been a contender, but they lost last week. There is no loss that a Group of 5 team is going to be able to put on the docket right now that looks as good as Boise State going to Oregon and losing by a field goal. It's not out there. So then the question falls to Army and Navy. And look, Memphis has got 1 loss to Navy, by the way, which is why I mentioned Army-Navy before I mentioned Memphis, because coming into the year, a lot of people thought, hey, Memphis could be the Group of 5 playoff team. They absolutely could. Good coach, really good roster, great transfer portal offseason, really good quarterback in Seth Hennigan, but they lost to Navy. And so you look at Army-Navy and they're 5-0 and you say, okay, this is really, really fun. It is awesome to think about the prospect of America's game, Army-Navy, having conference title, playoff implications, whatever the situation would be. It'd actually be off after conference championship weekend, but like it would be a spectacular scene. We've never seen the service academies get to that level. Air Force a year ago got these exact same conversations. Now, Navy and Army look a little different than they used to. I think they are better than they once were. We have not seen a service academy go unbeaten in the modern era of college football. It has not happened in a hot minute. I don't know if it's happened ever, quite frankly, but I know that in the college football playoff era, you haven't had these teams go unbeaten. It's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And Air Force a year ago was ranked in the top 25. They were 6-0. And people like Joel Klatt or myself were talking about the possibility of, hey, have you noticed what Air Force is doing? Could they go out and win the Mountain West? And they stumbled down the stretch. I'm not saying Army and Navy are bound to stumble or that they can't have really good years, but can you tell me definitively they're going to go through the rest of their schedules and 100% put together a better resume than Boise State? And by the way, the Ashton Genty factor absolutely matters because it gives national pundits, media people, voters, most importantly, the playoff committee, somebody or something to latch onto to kind of justify in their own mind, yeah, this team is capable of playing at this level. Because Ashton Genty, I think, is the best running back in all of college football. I legitimately believe that. And that factors in to how they are viewed nationally. It's not just, oh, wow, they're an amazing team. Like Army, Navy having really good seasons right now. Army's 4-0 in the American. Navy hasn't lost a game yet this year. They beat Memphis. Can you name one player on their teams? I can't, even off the top of my head. I'd be lying if I told you that I've watched an Army-Navy game start to finish. Army the rest of the year plays UAB this week at home. Navy's off this week. East Carolina, Air Force at North Texas. They host Notre Dame, and that'll be the opportunity. If Army's unbeaten going into the game with Notre Dame and they win, then they play UTSA, and then they play Navy, and that game is on December the 14th. That's the rest of Army's schedule. Can they win all those games? I mean, they've won all the games so far. They've looked really good doing it. Navy has an explosive offense. Next week, they're back in action. They play Charlotte. Then they play Notre Dame. Then they go at Rice, at South Florida, host Tulane, at East Carolina, and host Army. Let's say they lose to Notre Dame. Is that loss going to hold up in the same way that Boise State's loss at Oregon's going to? I don't think so. It depends. Might depend on a number of different factors. But the point I'm making here is that Boise State has the ability to just ignore and not have to worry about any other Group of 5 teams pushing them. There's even a world, if Boise State goes 12-1, they could be a higher-ranked conference champion than one of the Power 4 teams. They're generating momentum early in the year. The Oregon game keeps looking better and better. They keep dominating teams, and if that continues afoot, if they beat UNLV, if they beat Oregon State, they've already beaten Washington State, it's a really impressive resume, and I don't think anyone can touch them. So Boise State, their path to the playoff is completely in their own hands. For everybody else, I don't know that it is. I think you need help. I think you need Boise to lose one more time in order to have the opportunity to pass them, even if Army or Navy were to go unbeaten and have a win against Notre Dame. I think it's going to take a lot, and going unbeaten in and of itself takes a lot. So I'm fascinated to see how this all plays out, fascinated to see how the committee views it, because it's the first time we've ever had the 12-team playoff. But Group of 5 team is getting a team into the playoff, and look, Boise State, if they continue on this trajectory, there's a world where they get a first-round bye because they're one of the 4 highest-ranked conference champions. Where do you think the Big 12 conference champion is going to be ranked right now? Where do you think, at the end of the year, once they go through an entire conference slate, where do you think they're going? There's a lot of football to be played. So this conversation, mildly premature, but not entirely, because Boise's been playing at a really high level on both sides of the ball, and Genty is that guy. The reputation is there for them to get the perception they need to move into the upper echelon of college football. Like, if Boise State just keeps racking up wins and teams in front of them keep losing, they will be a top 10 team at some point before we reach conference championship weekend. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.